when the Torah says don't do something and a person doesn't follow what the Torah says, Rabbi Yehuda is of the opinion that even if there is no action, the punishment would be Makkos, would be lashes. The Rabbanan say no. If there's no action, no punishment of lashes. There are exceptions to the rule, but in general, the general is that without an action, just speech will not be lashes. Or being passive. Person not doing, violating the Torah by not doing something. Let's talk about a example that's close to home. A person is supposed to do a search and get rid of the chametz on Pesach. If a person leaves the chametz in his house and doesn't search for chametz on Pesach, he violates the prohibition, a number of prohibitions. One, the Torah says tashpitu. You have to get rid of the chametz. That's an assay. You have to get rid of chametz. Torah also says, Bayira bayimatzeh. 7 days you're not allowed to have, see, and find chametz in your house. You can't own chametz on Pesach. That's what the Torah says. So what happens if a person goes ahead and does not do the search and does not do the nullification, which at the end of the search, where you nullify any chametz that belongs to you, and you make ownerless any chametz. He just did nothing. So he violated the Torah by having chametz in his house. How did he violate it? Without an action. He did nothing. He was passive. He didn't get rid of the chametz. Would he get lashes? If a person did not do a search, did not do a nullification, would he get lashes for having chametz in his house over Pesach? He violated the prohibition. The Torah says, I don't want you to have chametz in your house, God says, but he had chametz in his house. He violated. So don't, and he violated a lo saseh. Does he get lashes? So that would be the machloket. That would be a nice case, nice example of the machloket in the Rabbanan. Rabbi Yehuda. The Rabbanan would say, you didn't do an action. You did not do an action. You were just passive. You don't get lashes. And that's the halacha. The Rambam says, but if you go on Pesach to buy, someone goes to buy chametz on Pesach, he did an action. He went and he bought chametz. Then he would get lashes because he violated with an action. He wasn't just passive. He just sat back and did nothing. He went to the store and he bought chametz on Pesach. That's the Rambam's opinion. That would be the scenario that he would get malchus. Rabbi Yehuda would say, even if the guy didn't do anything, he didn't go to the store on Pesach. He just didn't do anything. He left the chametz in his house over Pesach, didn't sell it, didn't do a nullification. Rabbi Yehuda said he'll get lashes. That's a nice case that illustrates the machloket, that even a violation of a lo saseh, if you violate it, but even without an action, you would get lashes. The Gemara is looking for the source. Where does Rabbi Yehuda find the source for this law? So the Gemara was trying to learn it out from Motzi Shemra, and that's what we were using yesterday, where the husband defames his wife, when he makes up a slander about his wife. The Gemara said that you can't learn from Motzi Shemra. Why can't you learn from Motzi Shemra? The Gemara says Motzi Shemra, the Torah is extra strict by Motzi Shemra. It gives both lashes and both monetary payment. You have to pay a fine to the father of the girl. And being that there's two punishments there, so it's not the norm. So therefore, you can't learn out something else which from there. You can't say, okay, there they get punished, lashes without an action. Here also, that's a different type of case. We find the Torah went above and beyond the norm. Good morning, Mr. Adri. If we want to remind everyone to say Birkat HaTorah before we start the learning. So, right. So that's what the Gemara said. You can't learn out from Motzi Shemra, because Motzi Shemra we call is a chidush, something unusual. It's its own category. It's not working with the norms. So once the thing is not working with the norms, you can't use it as the role model, as the model for other things to follow, to compare. You only can compare something which is comparable. When something it's on its own league, its own realm, you can't compare it. So Reish Lakish says, okay, I have another case. What's the case Reish Lakish says? Now we're 2 lines before the white lines. Elam Reish Lakish Gomer Me'edim Zomamim. He's going to learn from Edim Zomamim. Edim Zomamim, is, Mr. Haber, you got it, the place? Elam Reish Lakish. First word of the line is Amar Reish Lakish. 2 lines before the wide lines on Dalet Amar base. So Reish Lakish says, what does he say? He says, Gama me'idim zomimim. We learn from Eidim Zomim. Again, just to bring everybody up to date, the Gemara is looking for, we're on 4b2, left side, second paragraph to the bottom. The Gemara is trying to figure out what's the source that if a person violates the lo saseh, person says don't do something and he didn't follow the rules, even if he didn't violate it without an action, what's the source for Rabbi Yehuda's opinion that he gets lashes for such a thing? Where did he find a precedent that you could use to teach us, to enlighten us in this case? I found the precedent, and if it's comparable, we're going to use it as a source. So he said, I found the case. Reish Lakish says, I have the case. I figured out where Rabbi Yehuda got it from. The problem is Rabbi Yehuda didn't tell us where he got it from. Rabbi Yehuda was the Tana. He was an early rabbi, and sometimes they didn't always clarify what was their reasoning. They said a law, and then we, the Gemara, the later rabbis, have to figure out what their reasons were. The Rambam got into a lot of trouble, Maimonides. When he wrote his Sefer, Mishnah Torah, he didn't write sources where he got it from. So people were, people were critical. Where do you have to, show your work, so to speak? He obviously he didn't want to show his work because he felt that people weren't ready. People didn't have enough time to go through the whole Shas. He wanted to give them something short. He wanted to give them marks short and to the point. No. He happy that you should know everything. The Rambam, we have you should know everything. The Rambam says people were forgetting, and they weren't able to have the time. Didn't have the time to go through everything. So he didn't want to make it so lengthy. So what happened was that after Rambam wrote his Sefer, then you have a commentary called the Maggid Mishnah. They'll tell you where did the Rambam get it from. So the later rabbis will tell you where the Rambam got it from. What's the source? And here also, the Gemara wants to know what is the reason, what's the source for Rabbi Yehuda's law? So the Gemara says, Amar Reish Lakish, El Reish Lakish, Kam Eidim Zomim. Ma Eidim Zomimim, Lav She'ein Bo Maaseh. Eidim Zomim, the framers, they violated the Torah. Torah says, don't bear false witness. They violated it how? Without an action, because they just spoke. They spoke words. Lokin alav. They get lashes. Af kol lav she'ein bo maaseh lokin alav. So too, any lav that does not have an action, we could learn out from Eidim Zomimim would get lashes. Meaning the Torah does not need to tell us in every to write a special pasuk in every situation that there's such a thing called that a person gets lashes. The Torah tells us in one place, and that's enough that we can learn from one place to all other places. And therefore, he says we found the precedent in a case in the Torah that there was a violation of a Torah prohibition without an action, speech, and it came with it lashes. So therefore, we're going to learn out from there also there will be lashes for a violation of the Torah without an action, and that's going to be the source for a lav she'ein bo maaseh, a prohibition that was violated without an action would get lashes. And therefore, he says, by notar, if a person leaves it overnight, the Torah says, don't leave it overnight. Don't leave the Korban Pesach overnight. If you left it overnight, he would have gotten lashes by being passive, but the Torah needed to tell, but by the fact the Torah tells us to burn it in the morning, the Torah is telling us, okay, this guy's not going to get the lashes because we're giving him something else. We have something else for him to do. We don't need to get him to get lashes. That's not the punishment here. That's not the kapara. The kapara is to burn what he left overnight. Right, that's not the norm. Right. So that's morning. So that's what the Gemara, that's the Gemara says. It thinks at this point it found a good source from Eidim Zomimim. So the Gemara now in the first right line. So the Gemara challenges Reish Lakish is Morris, you with you got into it? The Gemara challenges Reish Lakish's source for Rabbi Yehuda. Mala Eidim Zomim shekain ein tzrichem hatra. They don't need warning. The general rule is to give anybody lashes, they have to be warned beforehand. Meaning to say, a person eats not kosher, If a person eats not kosher and he wasn't warned, he doesn't get lashes. The court does not give lashes. Do we have? Was the guy warned? Did two witnesses warn the guy? Two witnesses didn't warn. You just observed the guy eating intentionally. The guy says, the guy knows. It says on the presume, even if it's known that this is not kosher. But if he didn't, he wasn't warned. You don't give him lashes. That's how it would seem regarding warning. The guy has to be warned. Okay, so now, even if there's an action, the guy has to be warned. So fundamental, the guy has to be warned. Now the question would be, if we know that right, but the question is, we have to look up. Would some say there's a difference in something where everybody knows it's for? Meaning, what do you need? Why does a person need a warning? Is the person why you need a warning is to make sure that the guy knows he's doing something wrong? So then the question would be, if in a case where everybody knows this is forbidden, would it be necessary to warn a guy in that situation? Or it doesn't make a difference, even if it's known that it's forbidden, but a guy has to be warned anyways before. That has to be looked into exactly. But he might have forgotten. He might have kosher. Right. But the question would be, in a specific case, when everybody knows this is pig, says pig on the thing, would you say you need warning in such a case? But we're just gonna go the general, but that has to be researched, exactly the details. But there's a ruling that it needs warning. A guy doesn't.
People you can't come and say, oh, that's unkosher, you're getting lashes. No. Let's be clear. That's unkosher.
You need to know the series.
So, in other words, not to say, okay, he's eating that. You should know it's unkosher. All of a sudden, the guy's getting lashes. I'm all of a sudden, judge, jury, giving lashes, doing that. Not asking, not checking.
Not telling them, not educating them what the issue is. The court, who's the bezdin, there's an explanation for what they're doing. We told you beforehand, you knew, and then you violated. That's the law. That's the general law. The general law is that in order to give lashes to somebody, he has to be warned. That is the law. So now, even by murder, it goes that way. Even a guy, if a guy has a gun in his hand, you have to say, you shoot the guy, you shoot him. The old days, you take your sword. If you do that, you shoot that arrow at him, and you're gonna that's the protocol. That's the new protocol.
So right now, one shoot someone in front of two witnesses, he's the problem.
God takes care of it, but the court will not do anything. Court does. He wasn't warned. Therefore, that's one of the reasons why it's very rare we ever killed anybody. The Gemara says it's very rare, because how many times you're going to have time to warn a guy, and he's going to, you're going to be able to warn the guy, and then he's going to kill the guy right afterwards when he heard that you just warned him about it. So the Torah said, so the Edom Zomamim is an exception to the rule. Edom Zomamim, they come, they frame the guy. When the witnesses come to court, and we're here to testify about somebody, the court doesn't say to them, guys, but I want you to know, if you're framing this guy, you're going to get what you wanted to do to the other guy. For some reason, there's a stringency. The Torah is more strict, and it does not require such a warning of witnesses. Witnesses don't need to be warned. If you come in, you say something, if you frame somebody, you don't need to be warned. You're going to get it. You're going to get, if you have two other witnesses come and say, you guys are with us, on that day that you claim you saw that happen, you claim something happened on March 1st, and you were some other part of the road with us, they're going to get the punishment that they wanted to the other guy, whether they were warned, whether they don't need to be warned. The Torah did not require warning by Edom Zomim. So now the Gemara is saying, so we see Edom Zomim, it's in its own category. It has an extra stringency that we don't find other places. So now that you find by Edom Zomim that they also get lashes by just speaking words. Maybe Edom Zomim is, since we find other stringency by Edom Zomim, where we don't find anywhere else, So it seems that it's classified in its own category, its own creature, and therefore you can't learn the normal thing, the run-of-the-mill losas, if I could call it, the run-of-the-mill when the Torah says, don't do this, which requires the normal warning, like everything else, and then you want to say, we're going to give him lashes by violating it without speech. And you're going to learn from Edom Zom. Edom is a powerhouse case. It's the case that the Torah was extra strict on the guy. We find the Torah is extra strict because the Torah gives lashes for the Edom Zomim, even though it's right. So you can't speak right. So you can't use that fact that it's passive there to indicate anything about here. It's we see it has its own stringency.
Not a passive act, active act, because the guy's pro court. So there's some activity. I can't just sit here and then say, that's passive. But if I have to get up and go to court, there's some activity there. But you're not saying that.
But right, we're not, when the Gemara is not coming onto that. But the Gemara is coming onto a different point.
But activity in the order. This is totally blow out all of it.
Right, exactly. This is totally a total look at this extreme strictness that the Torah has by Edom Zomim. So therefore, you can't use it as you want to use this as an example of without doing it actually get Makkos. You can't use it. It's in its own category. So that's what the Gemara says is the issue with your source using Edom Zomim as a source. It's an exception to the rule, and it's an exception. And what did you say? Right, the Torah says you have to do, but the exception, but the novelty is that we find that the punishment is given without the warning, the prior warning. That's the novelty. So the Gemara says, Motzi Shemra Yochiach. The Gemara says, you want to tell me now? You're the way the Gemara is setting up is you're telling me Edom Zomim has such sort of unique stringency. Because it has this unique stringency that it doesn't have a warning, that's why there's lashes, even though the violation was done without a real action. So the Gemara says, I show you that's not true. You want to say that's the cause. There's a cause, and the effect of that cause, if that's the right expression, what comes out as a result of that cause is, therefore, you can get lashes also without an action. Because the Torah was extra strict regarding warning, that's the reason why Torah was also extra strict regarding lashes in such a case where you did not do an action. That's what you want to connect the dots. You want to say Torah was extra strict regarding warning. You didn't require warning. Therefore, the Torah was extra strict regarding lashes in such a case where you did not do an action. So the Gemara says, what about I'll show you that's not a true point. But I show you mostly Shemra. Mostly Shemra, when the husband comes to court and he says, my wife was unfaithful, we warn the husband. We tell the guy, hey, wait, why are you in court? I'm coming to court because I want to say something about my wife, but something happened to my wife. So we tell the guy, listen, you should know that if you go ahead and you say, and you're going to testify, you're going to make this claim about your wife, and you're bringing witnesses that she was unfaithful, you're going to have to pay a fine if these witnesses are found to be Zumim. You're going to pay a fine of 100 kesef to the father. They're going to get killed if they're framed. If they frame them dead, and also you're going to get lashes. You're going to get both. We're going to give you two punishments. We're going to give you lashes for defamation, and you're going to have to pay 400 zuz, 100 kesef. We warn the guy. The Motzi Shemra, we warn the guy, but not by Edom Zomim. It's interesting. The husband, when he comes to court, two witnesses sitting there. The witnesses, they don't get a warning. But the husband, when he comes with wife, we give him a warning.
Rabbi.
And he's not right. He's right because they are the ones who pulled the trigger. They pulled the trigger. You didn't pull the trigger. They should have known better. Should have known. Hey, you guys, because he told me to do it, but God told you not to do it. This guy told me to frame the wife. So that's what the Gemara says. Divrei harav, divrei hatalmid. Who do you listen to? The rabbi or the student? God's the rabbi. This guy is the student. Yes, Yosef and Sadiq.
So a couple of things. One, when
First, 1 second. I want to acknowledge that Dr. Navid is on. I forgot. I want to acknowledge. Yes.
So number one, this is like also like the case of Isha Sota, when the husband is a suspect that his wife is cheating on him, and he can go to the Kohen Gadol and to give her the special water, right?
Yeah, but first she had to be there. She had to be warned first. She was warned first not to be alone with another man. And then only if she subsequently was alone with another man with witnesses and they saw her be in the room for a certain amount of time, they don't know what happened in the room. That's only after that is there this process of sota. But there was a violation of the warning.
So
she was warned, and there was witnesses that she went into the room with the man.
So in the process, he can call her Motzi Shem Ra because she's really like was with another man.
No, so very good point, Yosef. He doesn't know what happened. He doesn't know that what happened in the room. So he's not Motzi Shem Ra. He's not saying that he's concerned that might have happened. He's not coming to defame her. He didn't come to hire false witnesses. That's not the case of Sota. The case of Sota, there's witnesses. If you ask him, did your wife have relations with him? I don't know what happened to him. I'm worried about it. He's worried about it. He suspects his wife, but he doesn't know what happened. He's not saying for sure that happened.
So, but he can still blame her. Tell her, listen, you will be unfair for you. I told you do not go with the room, and here you go. Inside with with the same person or with a different person in your room.
Right. So therefore, because of that, Yosef, that's why she's deserving to get disgrace. If it happens that she's innocent, but she's not 100% innocent. As Rabbi Feinstein said, the pasuk says, as a result of the process, she becomes clean. Rabbi David Feinstein asked, she becomes clean? If she didn't do the sin, she is clean. What do you mean? And she becomes clean. It says, no, she needs to become clean because she wasn't perfectly clean. She violated the warning. She was alone with a man with enough time she could have done a sinful act. So she also needs this atonement. So even if she didn't do the act with the husband, the man, she didn't do that sin, but she did a sin. She was a married woman. She was alone with another man. She violated the warning. Does that answer your question, Yosef?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Welcome. Good point. So now the Gemara says, so the Gemara says, Motzi Shemra proves to us, morning, Mr. Cohen. Motzi Shemra proves to us that even in a case where you don't need warning, Motzi Shemra they do need warning. By Motzi Shemra, even in a case when you do need warning, we say over there, what did the Gemara want to this? The Gemara said, let's get back to the steps of the Gemara. He wanted to say, Reish Lakish wanted to say, I have the sources, Adam Zomim. Adam Zomim, they get lashes. Even like we said, let's say the case by the Kohen. The Adam Zomim say, what did they say? They say that the son is not a Kohen because the mother was previously divorced. When the father got married to her, she was already divorced, but from a different man, and therefore they had no right to marry her. The child is not a Kohen. And we said the law is there's lashes. The Adam Zomim get lashes for such a thing. One year old, they get lashes. So we see the Gemara says, even though they did not do an action, it was not an action, they still get lashes by violating the law of the Torah without an action. That's the source that Rabbi Yehuda holds from Adam Zomim, that the person gets lashes without an action. So the Gemara says, then the Gemara shot back, you can't learn from Adam Zomim. Why not? Because Adam Zomim maybe is the exception, as Mr. Sati said. Maybe it's its own creation. It's too strict. The Torah is more strict by Adam Zomim than anywhere else, and therefore that's why it gets lashes. But other cases which the Torah is not so strict, would not get lashes if they would be violated by just a speech. That's what the Gemara wants to say. You can't compare to Adam Zomim. And the Gemara wanted to say, why is Adam Zomim so strict that maybe that's the exception to the rule? Because it's so strict because it doesn't require a warning. That's what you tell them. Correct? And everything else requires the warning. So I can't learn from Adam Zomim because Adam Zomimim is different. So the Gemara says, what do you mean? Don't tell me it's because of the strictness that it does not require a warning. That's why it gets lashed by Adam Zomimim, because I'll show you Motzi Shemra. Motzi Shemra is not as strict in that aspect. It doesn't require, it requires a warning. Motzi Shemra requires a warning. When the husband comes to court, we warn him. And because we warn him, that means it's not stricter than any other case. It's like the normal case. What's the normal case? You have to warn a guy. And yet, Adam Zomimim, Motzi Shemra, he gets lashes. The witnesses get lashes, even though it's the more regular, normal warning case. So you wanted to tell me that it's because you don't need a warning by Adam Zomimim is why Adam Zomimim gets this extra punishment of lashes, but it doesn't seem to be true, because if I show you that it's not the stringency of lack of warning that creates the lashes, because I have another case which needs a warning, and also does not have an action, doesn't have an action. The Motzi Shemra was also speech, and it gets lashes. So the Gemara wants to show that it's not this stringency, cause and effect. We're gonna have a board over here. What is the cause of not having a warning? The cause of the punishment of lashes. So the fact, because you wanted to say, because we have this stringency, that's the cause of the lashes. But I'll show you something else that doesn't have the stringency, and it still has the lashes, even though it's also done with just mere speech. So don't tell me that this is different, you can't learn from here, because this case, since it doesn't require a warning, therefore the Torah was extra strict. I'll show you something else that requires a warning, and still the Torah was extra strict. And said they got lashes by an action without a speech. Again, this is a little tough point, everybody. Let. So, but they get but they get lashes. One second. No, they get lashes. Yeah, but still still they get lashes. Let's say they wanted to go ahead and say he's a ben gerusha ben chalusa. Wanted to say that this child is not a real Tomei, right? Adam Zomim. And we say we can't punish, even if the Adam Zomim are Kohanim, we will not invalidate them from Truma. We'll give them lashes. Correct? How did they violate the sin? How did they do the sin? By speech.
Maybe that's the exception, because you can't punish the generation.
Right. So therefore, that's why we can't do to them what they wanted to do to the others. But we still give them.
Maybe that's an additional exception.
But we still give them lashes, even though it was just mere speech. So
You can't do anything else.
okay, maybe we shouldn't do it. But I mean maybe but it was in that. But again, the same way we have other prohibitions. But the Torah says don't talk lashon hara. If we talk lashon hara, we don't get lashes. We don't do anything. Sometimes we don't do anything to anybody. The court upstairs deals with it. We don't do anything when a guy violates a prohibition which doesn't have an action. But there is there's certain concepts.
Get a punishment of what you would do to the other guy, what would have happened, what would have been the result. Those that you get that punishment.
Generally, right.
Whether it's pain,
Lashes,
or whatever, even death.
right.
So now, the dad that comes in and says this guy's not a Kohen, that if it's untrue, he would get off seemingly completely free and clear if he doesn't get lashes.
Okay, I understand that point, but if we can, let me ask you a question, Mr. Asbury. There are witnesses that a guy killed somebody, but there's no warning. We put our hands up and we say we can't do anything. There are witnesses. The witnesses come forward and they say Reuven killed Shimon. So the fact that sometimes our hands are tied and we can't give the guy the punishment So we understand that nobody's getting away with anything. Sometimes, right, it's right. The court upstairs takes over, and then that's what Rashi says. What was the story? I think in the Chumash, Rashi says a guy killed somebody. A guy, in the case, a guy goes up the ladder and he falls down and he kills the guy, right? So what happened? What precipitated, if that's the right word? What happened that Hashem made this happen? So I think the case is that, let's say a guy killed someone unintentionally and there was no witnesses on it or something, and he didn't go to exile because no one knew about it. And then there's another guy who killed someone intentionally, but there was no witnesses on that guy. So what does Hashem do? He puts them both together, and the guy who's deserving of getting killed, he's going to be on the bottom of the ladder, and the guy on top of the ladder will fall down and kill him. And that'll be a way to get this guy to the justice will be served. So the point of the Gemara here is it the stringency that we find by Edom Zomamim, the specific stringency of the warning that does not require a warning, is that the reason why that it has this unusual law, this law that you give him lashes even without an action? The Gemara wanted to say that I can't use Edom Zomamim as the model for all cases without an action, that they'll get lashes, because Edom Zomamim has something extra strength by Edom Zomamim that does not by other places. And because it has that stringency that it does not require warning, maybe that's why the Torah gave this punishment of lashes without an action. So the Gemara says back, I'm going to show you, I'm going to disprove that line of thought. Why? Because I have another case where it requires warning. There is a warning. So the Torah wasn't extra strict regarding the warning, and yet there are lashes. Yet there are lashes for a violation with speech. Where is that? The guy who defames his wife. So the Gemara says, so we see it's not this extra stringency of need that you don't need to be warned, that's causing the lashes. Because I have another case that needs to be warned. The husband needs to be warned. And yet, so he's like one of the mill type of thing. He needs to be warned. And yet he only violated with speech. And yet he gets lashes. So it's not the strength of the lack of warning that's causing the lashes. Because I have another case where it needs a warning and also gets lashes. Is this clear? This is a tough point. Yaron, let's understand. If you,
someone that force testify, right?
right.
So two is like make a chazaka on what they're gonna say. The husband is come alone, so we have to warn him before we tell him, okay, if you're gonna do that, don't, you're gonna get lashes, right?
Right. Okay, but the Gemara doesn't feel that that's a strong enough difference. There might be different, but there might not be enough of a difference to cause change of the halacha. If you want to tell me that this is the reason for something, it says they do not need to be warned. In all cases, that's what it says from the Ein Tzrichin Hatra. They don't need to be warned. If the court wants to warn them, the court it would sound like they have a right to warn them. That's not a requirement. It's not a basic procedure. But the Gemara's point is, sometimes you want to tell me that this law, the reason why this is happening to the guy is because of A. And the Gemara is going to show you that's not the reason why that's happening. So if that's not the reason it's happening, so don't use that as the excuse. The Gemara wanted to use the excuse to excuse Edom Zomam, to say that Edom Zomam is the exception to the rule by the fact that it does not need a warning. So the Gemara says you can't use that as an excuse to say this is an exception to the rule. You come to court, right? The lawyer says you come, let's play it out in the court. We're the court. The guy says, you know what? A violation was done without an action. You violated the Torah, says don't do something. We want to give you lashes for it. and they're gonna say, Your Honor, you're gonna say to the court, where is your source? You want to give lashes so something was done without an action? I have a source. What's the source? The source is Adam Zomamim. The witnesses over there, they framed the guy. They sinned with their mouth. They weren't. That's not called. We don't define it as an action at this point. It's not an action. They sinned with their mouth. They get lashes. So too, anything that was sin, any sin will call any sin with the mouth. Any sin being passive also will get lashes. That's what the court is going to tell. I'm going to say to the court, Your Honor, you can't use Adam Zomim. Adam Zomim is an unusual situation, unusual case, unusual stringencies by Adam Zomim. Torah went out of its way by Adam Zomim, and therefore you can't apply. Your Honor, Mr. Lawyer, how did the Torah go out of its way? Where did you see the Torah went out of its way, something unique and different by Adam Zomim? Because the Torah did not require a warning, like it usually requires a warning. So therefore, Adam Zomim is different. You can't. Adam Zomim is such a strict thing that they don't require a warning. They still give a punishment. You can't compare everything else that needs a warning. So I'll say back, Your Honor, what do you mean? I have another case that does require a warning and also gets the punishment of lashes. And even though it was done through speech, I have the case of a husband. So I want to use that as a proof that you don't need. It's not because of this that Adam Zomim is an exception to the rule. I have another case that it's the reverse of the regular norms, gets a warning, and yet it gets lashes. So then what is he going to say back? So that's what they want to say. But Your Honor, you can't show me the husband's case. Why not? Because the Torah was unusually strict by the husband, because the husband Torah gave two punishments. He has to get lashes, he has to pay money. So you can't use that as to tell us to teach us other cases. But then I'll show you, back, I'll give you back more Adam Zomim. Torah sometimes doesn't give two punishments by Adam Zomim. Rabbanan hold you don't give two punishments for Adam Zomim. And yet you don't give two punishments to Adam Zomim. Torah, and yet you go ahead and what? And you still get lashes. So too, we can learn everything out. So then you're going to tell me Adam Zomim, you're going to go back and forth. You're going to show me each one has a stringency. But let's say Adam Zomim has a stringency that it does not require a warning. And the husband's case has a stringency. He gets two punishments. So the husband gets, does require, but has two punishments. Right, there's two exceptions here. The husband,
you can't learn out one from the other.
Right. So the Gemara says you can't learn out every case from each one separately. Because each one, if I want to learn from here, you're going to tell me there's a stringency here. If I'm going to learn from here, you're going to tell me exception here. But at the end of the day, it's the Gemara is saying the fact that this has a stringency, but this stringency is not similar to that stringency. And yet both cases have the same bottom line that they get lashes without an action. So the Gemara says that the common denominator is that it's not, we don't look at the stringency causing the effect. It's just the violation of a law. The Torah says, don't do something. You didn't listen to it. Even though it was not an action, you get lashes. The Gemara's understanding is if the Torah, right. The fact that each one has a stringency, it shows you that the stringency is not the cause for the law. But if this stringency is the cause, if the stringency cause for the law, so the law should not be by the other one, which doesn't have the stringency. So therefore, the Gemara says there's this rule called Sara Shaveh. What's the common denominator? They both are a violation of the law. Don't do, and they don't have action. Both don't have action. Both Adam Zomim, both Motzi Shemra, and they carry with it lashes. So therefore, the Gemara says we should be able to learn all over. Mr. Safdie, is that clear? Let's learn all over. It's like a joint. We're not learning from one, we're like learning from the two. The fact that these two cases, the Torah says there's lashes in these two cases, and the common denominator is that they don't have an action. So too, we can learn out all law that doesn't have an action from these two cases together, combined, that will get lashes. That's the source of Rabbi Yehuda. All cases that are violation, when the Torah says don't do something, and you violated that, even though it does not have an action, you violated it being passive or with speech or any other case, person will get lashes.
It's still a separate thing.
Right.
Some
may have, some may not have, but it's not because the Torah was extra strict by that case where it didn't require warning. Therefore, all other cases also we can't learn out. We can't say that. We're gonna put that as a side because we found another case which requires a warning, and yet get lashes, even though it requires a warning. Torah wasn't so strict. Right, the warning or no one. Right, so right, we're going to say that that's not the cause and the effect. And if it's not the cause and the effect, so what is the cause and the effect? Good morning, Jake. Good morning. The cause and the effect is that you went ahead and you did it. The Torah says, don't do something, and you didn't follow it. You went, even though it didn't have an action. Say it again. A passive avera could have lashes. According to Rabbi Yehuda, that's not the halacha, but that'll be Rabbi Yehuda's. And we'll continue tomorrow to see what the Gemara is going to shoot back on this. You think this is there's a common denominator here that could apply to everyone else? The Gemara is going to challenge this. Yeah, it'll be another comeback. The Gemara is not over. The Gemara is in the middle. What? They're two different cases, but right. But they're two different cases. Come on. Say it again. You get a warning too. Yeah, but in most cases, when they get a warning, there's one punishment. Again, when there's a warning to the husband, the husband gets two punishments, right? But every time, but in general, even when you warn somebody, you won't give a guy two punishments. Would you give a guy two punishments in general? You warn a guy, you never get two punishments generally. Always give one punishment. You hear what I'm saying? Have a great day. This is real heavy Gemara. Morning. Have a great day, Yosef. I have to go to the college to work with the boys.